Welcome to our council meeting today, the 27th of April. Could we all please stand for our opening karakia? Tu taua mai ronga, tu taua mai raro, tu taua mai roto, tu taua mai waho, kia tau mai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai kie. We have apologies for lateness from Councillor Taylor. If I could have a mover and seconder, thank you. Councillor Mawson and Councillor Price. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Are there any conflicts of interest? Announcements by the Mayor. I do just want to acknowledge that, of course, we had our 108th commemoration for Anzac Day this Tuesday, and our 4 local services, I have to say, were the best attended that I certainly have seen for a number of years, and it was just wonderful to see our local community all out commemorating and honouring our fallen soldiers as well as our current servicemen and women. So a very special day in our history, and a wonderful attendance this year. Do we have any announcements by management? Any minor matters not on the agenda? And confirmation of the ordinary meeting of council minutes held on Thursday the 16th of March 2023. Mover and seconder please, Councillor Mawson and Councillor, I've just had a mind blank, McGrath. All those in favour please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Moving straight into our agenda, and first up today we have the Annual Plan 2023-24 Development Paper, and I'd invite Jess up to talk to this, please. Just before Jess and Caroline do come to the front, I wanted to note that in the paper there is the whakarere revetment, which is referred to in the report. It's now actually called the rangatira revetment, and this is because we engaged with Manu Ahariri and Te Waka Rangapu to better represent the project and location of the project, and the new name reflects that. So just in case there was any confusion about that, so that whakarere revetment is now the rangatira revetment. And welcome, Caroline and Jess.
Thank you. So this report is seeking approval from Council of key information underpinning the annual plan, and seeks confirmation to inform the community on the proposed average rates increase for 23-24 of 11.7%, inclusive of a 2% rates increase for a disaster recovery rate. Normally, Council would consult with the community on work priorities and new projects for the coming year via its annual plan. However, given the impact of the cyclone on the community and Council's work programme, this report is recommending that Council adopt an annual plan in June 2023 without consultation, as provided for under Section 95 of the Local Government Act. This is a provision that has been used by many councils in previous years. The proposed budget for 23-24 is essentially the long-term plan year 3 budget of 9.7%, with a further allowance of 2% for a disaster recovery rate. The annual plan was revised after Cyclone Gabriel to recognise and show sensitivity to the economic challenges the region is facing. Council has carefully considered a number of levers for reducing the original pre-cyclone proposed rates increase of 16% down to 11.7%. To achieve the rates increase of 11.7% will require loan funding of $3.3 million of operational costs for the 23-24 year, deferring the rates contribution for the housing activity and continuing to fund any deficit from loans, and factoring into the budgets a vacancy loading of 10%. It was discussed at length, as you will remember, in council workshops, the impact that these levers will have on future rating levels, and it is noted that there is a trade-off in order to strike the right balance between adequately funding the organisation and providing the community with a rates increase that is manageable given the current climate. Council is proposing the introduction of a disaster recovery rate to be ring-fenced for recovery costs, such as rates, remission payments, resilience planning, and other costs associated with recovery. Section 23 of the Local Government Act provides for the implementation of such a rate and does not require consultation. This rate makes up 2% of the proposed 11.7% rates increase. And also, just to finish off, the capital plan has been revised to 75.8 million, was previously 90 million. And this has been reduced by rephasing capital projects into the next 2 years. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Caroline. Any questions, councillors? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, Carolyn and Jess, for the report. Just, I suppose, picking up on some of the commentary around the proposed rate increase. And so one of the things that I thought would be great to get some clarity on is, I note in the report that we don't have a whole lot of detail yet, but what the recovery rate or the targeted rate for that recovery fund will be used for, and what we envision that being used for.
So part of it, we plan to put aside for rates remissions, so that equates to around 200,000. And then the remaining amount, we have formed a recovery team, council recovery team. So there will be costs, we're still working through those, but the rates that we receive in from the disaster recovery rate will be ring-fenced to pay for resilience planning. So there's a number of council facilities that we need to rebuild and provide for resilience should a disaster like this occur again, which will require additional funding.
And am I correct that any community-facing work that we do will also come from this fund?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Just a question on our borrowing. Will we be going onto the open market or just borrowing off ourselves?
We're probably literally 1 or 2 months away from borrowing externally.
Thank you.
Councillor Bide.
Well, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. In terms of, for the sake of the public, 2% of a rates increase, how much does that yield, the 2% for the recovery?
In the order of 1.5 million.
Thank you.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Just looping back to Deputy Mayor Brosnan's line of questioning, with the funds that have been ring-fenced, are we going to apply any additional reporting rather than just financial to it? How will we be communicating with the community as to how exactly that money has been spent?
I can probably answer that. I think we can probably apply different sort of forms of metrics or monitoring around how we're performing in terms of our recovery planning and performance, and that could probably be measured and monitored through either our CE performance reporting and also through how we're sort of contributing through the regional recovery sort of structure as well in terms of the Hawke's Bay Regional Recovery Team. So we can probably sort of work through that in terms of working through the CE.
There's no, Councillor Simpson.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. The locality plan, the recovery locality plan that we're currently developing, will that set for us the activities that we will be using to spend the disaster recovery funding on?
Yeah, I think that will certainly describe much of where our efforts will be focused.
So that's likely to then create for us some KPIs to measure that expenditure again?
Yes, I would expect so.
Just one other question, just on a slight tangent. The 9.7% which we had set out in the long-term plan, that included a smaller amount of inflation than we're currently experiencing. So I suppose we just need to acknowledge that staff are probably going through at the moment and looking at their budgets and making reductions because we're actually budgeting an uninflation adjusted budget. So I think we just need to acknowledge that staff will be going through a bit of a period at the moment where they consider what they can and can't do within the constraints that we're now facing. So we just need to acknowledge that staff are putting some extra effort in at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. And I guess following on from that, we will obviously, as per the recommendation, be loan funding $3.3 million worth of costs to achieve the lower 9.7% rate increase. So what is our plan in terms of, as we move into our long-term plan process, to bridge that gap for our next 10 years and further ahead?
So I think it's worth mentioning that certainly loan funding, that gap does present some challenges working into our long-term plan, and it certainly pushes some financial it's challenges into the next financial year, and obviously sort of pushes some issues down the road for the council, and for the finance team and for the organisation as a whole. We'll need to certainly work through what that means for the organisation as we work through into the next long-term plan. The next long-term plan, the council will need to certainly relook at what its strategic priorities are, and I think that that's probably the appropriate thing to do in light of the severe weather event that we've just sort of experienced. So it presents a good opportunity to do that and to revisit all of the policy decisions that have either been made previously or that we're needing to relook at, and we'll need to do a really sort of deep dive relook at our long-term plan, level of service reviews, and sort of look at our budget, from a really high level sort of deep dive, a full review of everything, I think.
Thank you.
Councillor Brown. In the model, what's the length of term that we've applied to this 3.3 million?
So through the chair, we've applied a 5-year term for that loan.
A follow-up. If, considering we're going through this process as you've just described of a deep dive into our operations, I'm guessing that as we find potentially some better ways to do things, that we won't necessarily need to wait till the long-term plan is enacted before we can do some of them in advance. So there's a chance we might find some savings in the next sort of 18 months. If we do find those, we might not need to borrow the full 3.3 million. Just wondering in the wording and the recommendation, it says to approve the loan fund of 3.3 million. Would up to 3.3 be more helpful if we didn't need to borrow all of it?
Approver, Madam Mayor. I'll let the team answer a bit more detail, but I think just to set expectations, I don't think you're likely to find many savings this year. So I think the wording could be changed, but also just to set expectations, I think that's somewhat unlikely with the additional expenditure around our response. And obviously, as the Executive Director's mentioned, our key challenge will be gearing ourselves up for the LTP and also for Three Waters, because that's going to be a significant change for the structure of the organisation if that goes ahead as is planned. So there will be some fundamental conversations that we need to have with the whole of Council around your current capital programme, your community projects that you currently have. But for us, the key thing is knowing your strategic priorities, and then we can align to those. But I'll perhaps let Caroline answer the specific question about changing the wording. So, kia ora, thank you.
Thank you. Totally agree with what Louise has said. So if we do come across any savings during the year, then they're immediately implemented. But we do know that we've got a tough 12 months ahead, so quite unlikely probably that we would realise them. Councillor Bug.
Through you, Madam Mayor. With respect to the deferral of the 2% rates increase contribution, for housing, deferring it till the long-term plan, I just wonder, my question is how and why we are exploring other housing model options when a decision was made last year to retain the houses as they are.
So the decision, I think that's appropriate, and as I mentioned, it's around sort of revisiting policy decisions that have been made previously, and to do that in cycle. So when we talk about in cycle, it's around making holistic decisions in cycle in the LTP, and you're looking at making trade-offs around funding. And it would be around looking at a housing strategy where you could achieve the same outcomes, but by potentially achieving that by incurring implications for funding that have different implications for ratepayers. So looking at achieving the same outcomes, but by funding through different avenues. And I think that that would be appropriate through the LTP. Yeah.
There's no further questions. I will, Councillor Simpson.
Apologies, Madam Mayor, just one further question. Just on our balanced budget arrangements, does this have a significant, I know we were aiming to balance by the end of the 10-year cycle, but does this have consequences for us related to the balanced budget?
It deteriorates our balanced budget position from what we had forecast for the 23-24 year. We need to recast our years going forward to see what that does for the remainder of the long-term plan, but we would be doing that again anyway when we come to the long-term plan.
I'll just open for general discussion before we ask for a mover and seconder. Is there any general discussion from the floor? Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. I just want to speak in support of the recommendations that we have in front of us. In terms of discussion, I think we've come to a good balance. It's never palatable to have a larger rate increase than inflation. That's the reality we find ourselves in the business that we run on behalf of the community, is all of these community assets, which we also acknowledge that Napier has a unique position as a local government authority, in that we do hold a range of facilities that are tourist or visitor focused, and we've seen the impact on those as well over the last few years. So just acknowledging the position that we're in, I'd like to acknowledge the work that the team has done to find options for us to get that rates increase as low as possible. And I think in terms of the answer to Councillor Bogue's question as well, and leading into our long-term plan, I'm really looking forward to us being able to have those discussions around some policy decisions we may have made in the past with a different view of what the future looked like, and also being able to look at that deep dive, as Councillor Brown mentioned, into our operational efforts as well, to be able to really hand on heart say that we are doing absolutely best with the money that our community gives us. So yeah, that's my general discussion. Thank you, Your Worship.
Any further comments or general discussion? Councillor Brown.
I suppose I think where we've landed is good. I think everyone around the room knows this is it's such a hard decision that we've come to, and I think it's like I did a pros and cons list last night, and it's pretty tight. And I suppose it's really nice to be able to give this gesture to the community around reducing it from the 16% increase that we know we need, and I think it's exciting that we're doing this deep dive in terms of what we need to look for in our strategic priorities for the future for council. I'm really conscious that we're also on a journey with our asset management, and that in the short term that might spring up more unknown costs than unknown savings. And so I don't have heaps of faith that we're going to find a whole lot of savings in the future, but I think taking into account like what's really important to us, and I think getting a really good long-term plan, prioritising staff well-being and looking at what the community is facing at the moment, I feel like we've landed on a good balance.
If there's no further comments, I'm happy to move from the chair. If I could have a seconder, please. Councillor Gregg, thank you for that. I think Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Brown have already covered off a lot of the key factors that we've all had to consider as part of arriving at the recommendations before us today, and acknowledging also that we know that for approximately the past 20 years we've had the lowest average annual rates increase for any similar sized council in the country. So we're talking about, you know, a number of years worth of probably lower than rates increases that we should have had, which is why we're in the position we are today, and which was why in our earlier workshops there was a level of, I guess, agreement that a rates increase of 16% being incredibly high was justifiable in regards to our history, and certainly in regards to the challenges that we have before us now. And recognising as well that on top of those challenges we had back when we workshop this originally, we've now had the cyclone. But we still felt that it was absolutely vital for our community at this point in time to try and reduce that rates increase as much as we possibly could. And for me personally, the comfort that I have in going with the 9.7% is because we have a process that we're going to undertake with regards to the long-term plan. And I don't think it's a matter of trying to find savings. We have to find savings. We have to find ways to actually cut our cloth to fit our budget. And from my perspective, doing these really deep dive level of service reviews are absolutely imperative. And there's going to be some incredibly challenging decisions to be made around this table and in conjunction with our community over the next 18 months as we work on our long-term plan. And we will be going out and doing extensive engagement and consultation as we work through the long-term plan process. And I think, you know, we need to be really honest with our community about what it is that we have ahead of us, and that they might not be getting the same that they've had for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, that we may well have to reduce some of the things that we're doing. Or the alternative is increased rates increases for a period of years ahead. So that's the conversation that we have to have, and I think we're well and truly ready and placed to have that conversation. So thank you, Caroline, Jess, and to all your team for all the work that you've done on this. I know it hasn't been easy, but your guidance and your advice and input has been much appreciated, so thank you. Juliet, would you like to speak to the...
No, thank you.
Just open up for any further speakers? Being none, I will put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. And we have Caroline remaining at the front for our second agenda item, being joined by Denica today.
Just me.
Just you.
Yep.
And this is around the approach to funding requests through our 23-24 annual plan process, as we're not having formal hearings. So pass across to you, Caroline.
Thank you. So in recent years, Council has consulted on its annual plan, and as part of the hearings process, funding requests would come through and be deliberated by a council, and then a final funding decision would be made for the allocation of those funds and then adopted through the annual plan. Given the previous paper's recommendation, and that there will now be no hearings this year because we're not consulting, officers are proposing that any funding applications to the Council Projects Fund are assessed by officers, and a recommendation is presented to Council for a final decision on the funding allocation. The Councillor Project budget or fund for 23-24 is 100,000, And this paper is also recommending that any unspent budget from this financial year is carried forward into 23-24. So this budget, the councillor project budget, is primarily for contributing to costs of community projects that are not eligible for other grant funding available through council. There's an information sheet for the project fund and an application form and assessment template attached to this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Just a quick question from myself. The council project fund has a $30,000 minimum application criteria. I'm just wondering if we have funding requirements for less than that. I appreciate we've got the other council grant funds. Is there any flexibility with this one though to consider lower application amounts if it doesn't meet the criteria for one of our other funds?
Yes, we could do that on like a case-by-case basis.
Great, thank you. Questions, councillors? I think it's pretty straightforward. Could I have a mover and seconder, please? Deputy Mayor Brosnan and Councillor Bogue. Would you like to speak to that, Deputy Mayor?
No, I think it's a very well thought out process. It's something our community will be quite familiar with if going through other application processes with us. So yeah, I support.
Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I support this process and this resolution as well. And just a reminder to the public, I think that the deadline for the community services grant applications is in June. I think the applications open in May. And so just a reminder to the community out there to keep an eye on our comms if they're going to be applying for that particular contestable fund. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bogue. Any other speakers? I put the motion then. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Caroline. I would now invite Thunis Andrew to introduce the changes to recommendations for the War Memorial project.
Morena, Madam Chair. Council approved in May 2021 recommendations made by the Roll of Honour Subcommittee to implement this project. Now, a few weeks ago, the subcommittee met again and made a few more recommendations for your approval today. So it's as approved or as recommended. Do you want to add anything? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? And I guess just a comment that these amendments really are sort of a tidy up, I guess, just recognising that some of the original resolution needed to be altered slightly, and I might just pass across to Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Actually, this is one of her projects that she's been leading, so if you had any further comments to add.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the subcommittee was Dorothy Pilkington and Craig Morley and myself. You may remember a big long list of recommendations on how the roll of honour would be treated during the restoration process, sort of many points. Some of the points related to when there would be corrections made to verified misspellings or the addition of missing initials, etc. So the on reflection and in discussion, some of the subcommittee members with the stonemasonry work has made the decision that as part of this restoration there should be no changes made to the original roll of honour. There had originally been, in the original recommendations, an option for family members to flag a verified misspelling be corrected. That process in practice is quite difficult, and so we landed on a change to a recommendation that they shouldn't be touched as part of this restoration, but that's something that could potentially be explored in future, so giving that clarity in the changes to recommendation 3. The recommendation 12A was that originally that the full reference group approve the final lists of the roll of honour. We thought we could, and with the Mayor's suggestion as well, pull that back to the subcommittee, essentially those who have been deep diving into the role as well, to check that research before it's finally released. So that's just for expediency, that change. And Appendix 1, Recommendation 2, is we had originally thought of 2 display monitors fixed to the wall. Drew's found a way for that to be consolidated into one with the programming he's working on. So we're recommending that small change as well from 2 to 1 for the living roll to rotate round as part of the restoration design. But happy if there are any questions.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Any questions or discussion? If I could ask, Venus.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just to add, we also gave an update on the floral clock. So if there's any questions on that, we would appreciate to hear them.
Any questions on the floral clock? I know that the project team and the Depot and Parks teams are frantically planning the design of the floral clock and wanting it to be reminiscent of the original design, and we have discussed that for the opening day we will have the date included in the floral clock design. Back with the original floral clock early on, they used to change the date every day. I don't quite know how they managed to achieve that, so we're not going to be committing to doing that, but we did think that for the actual opening of the War Memorial and the floral clock, it would be very fitting to have that date included in the garden design, floral design part of it. Right, if I could have Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
I was just going to say, one of the small changes, I know we've talked about this in workshop, but it would be good. The slope of the floral clock, Drew, it's slightly different from, or it's slightly different, but
Yes.
You've been in conversation with the clock designers, just giving some certainty that what we're going to install will work.
Yes. No, I have met with Rowan Pilbrow of Pilbrow Watchmakers, and I discussed with him the change in the angle. The angle of the slope is shallower than it used to be, and the feedback I've had from the watchmaker is that the shallower the slope, the better it is for the mechanism. So we actually are being more favourable to the mechanism of the clock with a shallower slope now.
Perfect. And my understanding of the shallower slope is to allow that we don't need to necessarily fence it for falls at each end, and better for the planting as well.
Correct. There's several reasons for it. One is it brings it a little more in line with the appearance that we had in the original design. 2 is by going shallower, we no longer have to put up barricades and the likes to meet health and safety requirements for fall arrest and fall restraint. 3, it's a little more favourable to the maintenance of the garden. They're not having to deal with the same kind of slope and the runoff that they had before. And 4, when you are standing on the lawn looking north towards the whole facility, you don't end up with the mound of the clock compromising the view of the plaques in the pavilion.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Right, so I'll ask for a mover and seconder, please. Councillor Crystal and Deputy Mayor Brosnan. Would you like to speak to that, Councillor Crystal?
Just briefly, I'd just like to thank all the work that's gone into this Roll of Honour. I know it's been a huge amount of effort and time by that group, and I think the community will be pretty excited to see what we've achieved here, and the floral clock as well. So I'm just really excited that this is finally in its last home straight, and we're really, really looking forward to the opening day, hopefully in the not too distant future.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Brosnan.
Thank you, and Godspeed, team.
Are there any other speakers to the motion? I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Furnace. And moving on to agenda item 4, the recovery from Cyclone Gabrielle and our associated locality plan. I'd invite Richard and Anne to present to us. Welcome.
Thank you. Through you. I realise that this agenda item's quite full in terms of there's quite a lot in it, and I'm not entirely sure how to approach describing it, but I thought I will take the time to go through a few parts of the agenda paper rather than take it as fully read. And I wanted to kind of, I think, start back right at when of the event, and you know, and when Napier was without power and communications and access, the wastewater plant inoperable, and the surrounding area, you know, pretty much wiped out with from the cyclone, and we talk about recovery, and the cleanup has been underway for some time, but I wanted to acknowledge from the outset that that's quite an abstract notion for the community, and there are many that have had their, you know, their lives turned upside down by the event, and it's and recovery, I guess, for them personally is messy and complicated and possibly quite lonely, you know, as they go through these processes, or with insurances and dealing with agencies and all these things, trying to repair their lives and communities. So I wanted to acknowledge that from the outset, that, you know, recovery is kind of like, it's for us to structure as best we can how we help our community recover, and it's here for us to give us, I guess, our best attempt to organise ourselves to respond as best we can. But we recognise that there is the communities at all sorts of different levels in terms of the recovery. And I also wanted to say that recovery is not it's not a destination, or like there's a beautiful thing that you can follow on the clipboard and then it's all sorted. It doesn't. It's really messy and uneven, and there will never be enough resources to kind of deliver to the aspirations of the community and the individuals that have been affected. That is inevitable, and they won't be delivered in the time, you know, that we would love it to happen like this overnight, and it just doesn't. It's slow and complicated and difficult. So I think in terms of where Napier, the council is at, it's very much understanding our community's needs and issues within at quite a granular level, and then also working within the regional and the central government context to ensure that the effort is coordinated with all the agencies to deliver the best kind of thing for our individuals in our community, but also our community as a whole. In terms of the way things are happening top down, this special legislation has come through to kind of deliver the recovery program from central government, and that enables council and other partners to engage the other way too. So the top down, how that merges with that legislation, and I think our job in that is to make sure that we unbundle with our community the five focus areas for the recovery: the social, built, natural, rural and economic, and that we work alongside our national and regional partners and advocate for our communities of interest who have been directly affected, but also for, I guess, particularly the circumstances that led to Napier being cut off completely during the cyclone, and the that we need to make sure that we remember that time and remind other people that that's not acceptable. And I want to really stress that point, because there is also, in terms of the way insurance and the way the structures work, is that it's quite hard to build back better. It's much, what happens is insurance asks you to, or they fund like for like, for example. So if you're going to build back better, somebody's got to pay for that betterment. And also in terms of, even with our initial locality plan, which is in there, it is designed at a 6-month horizon, which is quite hard to get strategic. And, if we're thinking about lifelines, say with our wastewater as an example, it's quite hard not to just put back what you've already done within that short time frame. So we need to, I think, be aware of that, and to make sure that we are still advocating over the long haul for, what Build Back Better is for Napier, I think is around having a lot more resilience in those lifelines for the city particularly. And we need to keep our eye on that we don't get the very short-term focus and lose sight of that. And I wanted to add with that, it was sobering to hear from Wairoa after Cyclone Bowler 30 years ago that they had said then that the lifelines needed to be improved, and they had no improvement whatsoever during that time. So it's a real risk, I think, going forward, that we keep our eye on that. So our core part for us is to ensure the recovery of our wastewater plant and other directly controlled and damaged and underperforming infrastructures, that we are prioritising those. And in terms of the discussion that we had previously on the long-term plan, that will have a material impact on I guess where our revenue goes into the future as well in terms of investment. And it's really important, I think, for us to advocate for the flood protection, particularly Awatoto in particular is really feeling vulnerable. Our Awatoto industries, this is regionally, nationally significant industries that are feeling, quite vulnerable in terms of what protection they are getting. And so it's important. That's an example of where we need to make sure that we're advocating for them, but also I think in terms of if we're looking at back through to the event and how close it was that Taradale, would be inundated, and I cannot imagine what that would have been like if we had to do something with the community in terms of displacement at that time, if that had gone over. So we need to have a look at resilience and advocate, for our city there too. We work side our partners, our mana whenua partners, and our councils and government agencies, and within the overall Matariki framework. So I think this is a time when we know each other's business in terms of the recovery and understand what is being delivered by whom as we go forward through that. And then understand how the recovery and the component parts of it will, as they get untangled, how they will be financed and by whom, and that picture is yet to emerge. The locality plans is one of the key parts of that, and that gives us an opportunity to put forward for Napier and the communities of interest that associate with us, which is a key part, those matters that we, under those headings, I guess, for consideration within the regional framework, and then that also will have funding implications from the national pot. So that's the locality plan has a very short time frame, as we know, and we've got something that needs to be delivered tomorrow for submission into the regional part. And the way that works is basically those locality plans from across the region will be merged into one, so an integrated whole. And that's quite important to understand in terms of communities of interest. So we have communities of interest beyond our territorial boundary because they identify and associate with Napier. Their issues are in the locality plan, and that's fine. That will all bubble up into the regional plan. As I say, the locality plan, this one is for the 6-month kind of window, and the next, we anticipate that the next version of the locality plan for us will be very focused on understanding from our partners what sort of resilience they're putting into the lifelines and advocating for, you know, say the power station to have the resources to get more resilient. And I don't know what the story is exactly with the Redcliffe location, but that's an example of where we would need more resilience. We need to understand from the regional council what its overall, you know, now once they've repaired the flood banks, what's the overall strategy for that, and advocate for that. That all these things will be in that second locality plan. So a big part of that is for us to understand our partners' businesses as it applies to Napier. And as part of the current one, we did have the opportunity, we squeezed in some community meetings around this, and we've done our best to get around that. And I'm just going to turn to Anne quickly to give you a bit of a rundown of what came through with that.
Thank you. Yes, we held 4 community meetings last week, and I know a lot of you attended, so thank you very much for coming. And I'd also like to thank the staff that attended and the staff that organised it as well, because it was, as you know, the time frame's quite tight, so we're doing everything in quite a bit of a hurry. We went to visit the communities in Miani Bayview, Awatoto, Miani Brookfields, Awatoto, Bayview and Taradale. What we learned from the communities was that some of them are really still in the kind of response mode, still dealing with things on their own property. And so while we were talking to them about the locality plan, we were still hearing from them that they're having issues dealing with silt removal and things like that. But it was important to talk to them about the locality plan and let them know what we're doing and what we're required to do by the Regional Recovery Agency. As Richard said at the beginning, going forward, I think our communities are going to be very important, and we really need to, my team and I really need to concentrate some effort on some of those communities, working with them and figuring out what they need and how we can best support them over the next few months and how we can lead that into the next locality plan. Yeah,
thanks, Anne. And we kind of structurally having, we think of that in two ways, is like making sure that we are working with our communities at quite a granular level, particularly the ones where Napier's in that strange position where we've got our affected communities and our kind of unaffected other than the event of the day. And so we need to make sure that we are heavily engaged with those affected groups. And then the other part is engaging in that regional level for the top-down kind of structures. So I just wanted to turn to the financial part of it. There are financial risks to council in undertaking recovery work. You know, you have to go and do stuff, and this is inevitable, but we know that there are risks involved with responding and investing, and there will be costs associated that we cannot get back from insurance or central government in the long haul. It needs to be acknowledged that you know, the resources are limited. The cyclone affected a lot of the North Island, while it very much affected you know, the Hawke's Bay. Nationally, there will not be enough money to go around for everything that we would hope for. So there will be some things, without a shadow of doubt, that will, you know, we will have those hard decisions of how we're going to afford them going forward into our long-term plan, and they will come through. And that last point, I think, is something that we need to be kind of very conscious of, is that the focus is on reinstatement, and that is expensive just by itself, you know. So we need to aspire as hard as we can for betterment, but be realistic that we know that the resources are barely there to cover reinstatement. And so what that means for our community going forward, we need to really keep a close eye on, so that we can invest wisely on their behalf in our own long-term plan, as well as we understand as those issues kind of tease out and we know the funding areas of shortfall coming through as well. So it is quite a dense item, and there's quite a lot in it. I didn't want to go through the structures of you know, how we interact so much, but happy to take any questions on that. And just wanted to note that the locality plan is due for submission tomorrow into the to be considered as part of that regional framework.
Thank you, Richard and Anne. I do just want to take a moment to acknowledge and thank both yourselves and Gus and Catherine, who are part of your team, and also the other part of the community team that came and helped with those community hui we had last week. It has been a very short time frame, so I know there's been weekends and nights sacrificed, so thank you to all of you. And I think you make some very important points there, Richard, about managing expectations, because this has been devastating across so much of the country. Alongside that, though, we do have to put our best foot forward, and I know we're all committed to doing that, so you don't ask, you don't get. So we do really want to take the time with phase 2 of our recovery planning, which we have 6 months to do. Thankfully this time really does cover off on those medium and long-term requirements for us as a council in terms of what we need to invest in, but also our many partners that will also be providing input into that phase 2. So speaking of key partners, I do want to thank also Mana Whenua and Tangata Whenua and the many community members who have provided input into this initial locality plan. There's been some really robust discussions and information come through from them, which is a vital component of what we're including in our submission. So thank you very much to them. And I do see that this next stage will also be an integral part of our long-term plan process. As I said, we have 6 months to prepare our next one, so it will be happening alongside the initial stages of our long-term plan process, and I see them as being very much weaved together as we plan for our next 10 years as a council. So I will just open up. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Mawson.
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, just acknowledging what Mayor Wise said. There's been a lot of people involved with this and stuff, but I just wanted to just highlight putting my multicultural hat on with my portfolio, and I did notice the omission of some of our ethnic communities who would have, not necessarily having English as their first language, would have had a horrific time during this event. So just to acknowledge that, Napier is quite obvious. Anywhere up to 20% of our people are from immigrants. So just, it would be nice to have somewhere in there, even just noting that they were severely impacted through this. And certainly when it came up to the response, the initial relief, some of our communities in the ethnic space, especially our Sikh community, did some amazing work with recovery, providing meals and so forth. Those out in Bayview and Estelle will appreciate some of that. So yeah, I just feel it's worthy that they definitely get a mention in this plan, and certainly moving forward some way. I appreciate there's multiple languages, but some way we can try and cater to their needs moving forward into that recovery space. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just through the chair. I'm just looking at the plan on the page, I'm not sure if it's 11 or 12, but it starts with shelter was provided. I'm just wondering if we can add a couple more in there if it's not too late, just to acknowledge Equippers Church and Central School, and also the Bayview Pub was providing accommodation and shelter very early on. If that could just be added, that would be appreciated. And just one other, and it may have been in there and I may have missed it. As a city, we lost a mission concert, and for the business side, that actually takes away a huge amount of money out of our community as well. And I think that should probably be acknowledged in there as well, because I see Art Deco is, and just perhaps mention that as well. Yep. If you could.
Councillor Mawson and then Councillor Brown.
Just through the chair, just to sort of build on that, I did notice in 4.3, just event impacts, there was acknowledgement of people's perceptions as to areas of concern with security. But I think that the word perception, we often use that because ultimately there is a perception out there that oftentimes things are unsafe. However, I think that the word's a little bit inadequate for some of our wider region, considering that we've mentioned our more actual area rather than geographical or LGA areas in the report, to sort of acknowledge, some of the feelings that were out there in Estelle and Puketapu and so forth with looting. I just feel that maybe that could be elaborated on a little bit more. Surely there would have been perceptions in some areas and nothing was happening because of the wider region, but I just feel that, we need to acknowledge them a little bit more. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Through the chair. One of the key decisions that the public are looking at and asking us about is who and when are the decisions being made about managed retreat. And I notice it's not in the scope of what's included in these locality plans. Is there any update on who's making that decision, how the community are going to be engaged, or and when that's going to happen?
The process is from the Crown, like central government would lead that process. They are still finding, I guess, I know that there has been work done in terms of trying to get the data to make good decisions around that. However, and I know that there is a desire to be expedient about that, particularly on the back of their experiences with Christchurch. But at the same time, it's a very complex and difficult process to go through. And at the moment, I think they are still establishing exactly what the process is in terms of where, say, we fit in terms of working with our communities with that. And that we have not been made aware yet as to how that will be rolled out, but we do know that they are thinking about it and they are gathering the data to be able to make those decisions.
Councillor McGrath.
It's just a follow-up from that, and I know that a lot of our communities are actually ready to rebuild and they're caught in limbo. Could we put it to the Crown for them to start excluding areas that won't be red zoned? Because currently, you'd have to say the whole region is in limbo. Who can start, who can't? I know there'll be some really tricky sites, but there'll be some sites that they can probably clear very quickly. So if we could get that, then we can start, the rebuild.
Yeah.
Speak and ask.
Thank you.
Note that as an action, please. Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, I'm just adding to what Councillor McGrath said about naming others who provided housing, temporary housing. Could we also mention the King's House Church specifically because they had close to 400 RSE workers there? Oh, sorry.
Just the next line down.
Sorry.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I was on the wrong section. Could I ask another question then? Have the yellow stickered houses been white stickered or unstickered? Has their status changed at all since they were originally assessed?
It totally depends on what work they've done.
So there will be some.
I know at least one has.
Yeah.
And did we have very many uninsured homeowners?
We don't know that at a granular level, but there is a concerning percentage indicated around what they think, or people that have not made claims in terms of those stickers. So there's quite a bit of uninsurance.
And just one final question for you, Anne. What sort of response did we get from the council online? Have your say?
I think it's in here. We had approximately 120. We had 68 responses, and they were telling us similar stories to what we heard out from the community.
Thank you.
Councillor Cran.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Throughout the locality plan document, it references genuine partnership with Māori, and I think, my acknowledgement echoes others around the room in saying, it's a really good job in a short amount of time. But there seems to be an opportunity here. It appears to be, or it's one of the most, I think, collaborative efforts that we've made with our mana whenua and tangata whenua partners so far. And I'm just wondering what sort of, thinking of the other opportunities that lie in such a process as this and trying to get as much out of it as possible. Are we recording or looking for agreement as to future ways of working with those partners as a result of this? Is that something formally that we can put in place as a result?
I think I might have even written it in the item, but the recovery process will create new ways of learning. Like you do have, because you have to engage with your communities of interest, like it's in terms of what's already happened in terms of the relationships, say, with the Esk Valley and those communities. There are things, it kind of is a bit of a, if we notice these things happening, we actually, there's a number of things that should be changing as we go through the recovery process. So I think, I don't know about formally recording it, we're not doing that, but I think we are certainly of a mindset that we want to keep building on what we've established with mana whenua through this process and be genuine in our partnership with them going forward. It also acknowledges, I think, that process, has kind of made us think differently about our boundary, our territorial boundary, and I think that we don't need to necessarily, we can use those relationships regardless of whether those marae are within our boundary or not. So it's already a new way of working.
I guess my point is around the formalising side of it, is because they are a partner through legislation. It allows us to be able to define both or all parties' responsibilities as part of that relationship too. So it's something that I thought would be useful for everyone moving forward. If that becomes part of the journey and an end goal, or something that we can get out of this, that's really positive.
Yeah.
Okay, any further questions or general discussion? Councillor Crystal and then Councillor Taraha.
Just through the chair, I did notice, and you've spoken it briefly, Richard, about the Awatere and the stop bank being low priority for the regional council, or not up high in the fixing. And you said you were going to get them to review that. Is that happening?
Yes, we're working at that, and we're in the process of trying to engage with the right people to get the right priorities on that. But that one again is, was one that we just need to carry through Locality Plan 2 as well, but also we develop that relationship with the regional council that we can influence them on that priority. Yeah.
Councillor Taraha.
Kia ora, thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Kia ora, Richard, do we have until midnight tonight to submit the locality plan, and once we've submitted it, do you know what the next steps will be?
The next step will be that that there'll be, in terms of the recovery framework, they'll try and pull those locality plans together, and that will go through using Matariki as well to try and make sure that that is comprehensive and captures everything it should, and then that'll. I'm not entirely sure actually of the dates for them to get themselves organised on that, but that's the next step, is that will go into that regional kind of consideration, and then that goes through to government. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to find a timeline, but we don't have a timeline for that.
It's a little bit unknown yet. There's, I think, only a handful of staff working for the Regional Recovery Agency, so they're kind of rushing to get things done as well. As I understand it, the Regional Recovery Plan that will incorporate all the locality plans will go to government in early June.
That was my understanding. We're aiming for completion late May for submission at the beginning of June. And I guess also acknowledging that, considering the Crown is actually announcing their budget in May, in all likelihood, from the funding side of things for the short-term priorities, they probably already have a figure in mind, and that's why our continued focus into phase 2 is even more important, because that's our opportunity to really start working with the Crown on what the needs will be for the longer-term recovery.
And just to add to that, a really key thing for us is to support our, like to look at those agencies we want to improve their lifeline, say Waka Kotahi or the Power, and support them to be successful in their bids to do that. So we've got a real role, I think, in terms of advocating to our partners. Don't think of this as council having to deliver all this stuff. It's actually kind of trying to work the room in terms of those agencies' responsibilities and making sure they are actually resourced to be able to achieve for our community.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, thanks Richard, and we've all had a conversation around the fact that a population of 67,000 to be cut off from a lot of our core public services for a number of days, no access to the hospital, no access to our main police station, no access to the civil defence group space and completely cut off by road, telecommunications, power, everything. So we do really need to work in partnership with all those other agencies to ensure that we can move forward as a community and have those vital services available for our community. So some pretty challenging conversations on the horizon, that's for sure.
And to be fair, those are not even, you know, those, all of those things apply to all the other places in the region as well. Like, that's why I use the example of Wairoa not having they've had, you know, their lifelines addressed last time too. So don't think it's just Napier, or we got exposed through the event, but actually those matters are across the board. So I think that it's a regional argument in a way for what does Build Back Better actually mean. That's what it means, is that all those agencies are actually empowered to do better. Yeah.
And whilst I don't disagree, Richard, I think that for us in particular, due to the size of our population, and no disrespect to Wairoa, although they do have quite a well-resourced medical centre in their town, probably better resourced than our one that we have in Napier, so it highlighted that. So I agree it's a regional issue, but for us, I think it really brought it home that, you know, we're a significant population without core public health services. So, yeah. Any further questions or discussion? So I will ask for a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Tareha, moving and seconded by Councillor Crown. Councillor Tareha, would you like to speak to that?
No, will we send in it today or?
Tomorrow, I think we close of business tomorrow.
Close of business. Kia ora, thank you.
Councillor Crown.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to speak to it through you, Madam Mayor. I think today a number of our agenda items have sort of, I think, brought us back down to earth in regards to the situation that we find ourselves in as we move forward, not just from a cyclone, but as we move forward from the effects of the last few years. I think this is an important first step, and it's one of the opportunities that an event like this has provided us. The one really good thing that I think that it has done, as we signal these sorts of changes to our community, they're going to hear us constantly come out and say to them, things will be different. We're going to have to do deep dives, that we're going to have to assess things, and that they're going to be challenging conversations to be had. But through this event, what has happened is that it's actually realigned everyone's priorities in regards to what actually is important, you know, what makes life living in Napier, what we need to be able to do that. And when you look at things like our wastewater treatment plant or the environment or lifelines, people being resourced to be able to support themselves when challenges are presented. You know, I hope that we kind of hold on to that. When we're going out to our community, when we're having the conversations, that we can be brought back to those priorities and the things that really matter right now, because that's a good basis to build on the things that matter in the future, you know, having those fundamental things in place. So, as I said, a good first step. It's great to see the collaboration that's already started. I expect to see that grow, you know, including communities like our ethnic and migrant communities and other communities that maybe don't have the numbers, you know, that others do, that are minorities, etc. But this organisation is in a really unique position in that we speak for our entire community. We have to make sure that we consider everyone. We don't have, you know, we're not afforded the ability to just sort of pick and choose some here and there. We have to think of everyone. And I think that, you know, when we're looking at the advocacy that is required, when we're looking at, you know, the whole national effect of this event, making sure that the Napier voice is strong and advocated for well, that's what makes these things really important. So thank you to the recovery team and everyone that's participated so far.
Open up for any other speakers to the motion. Deputy Mayor Bosnan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was really pleased to read through the locality plan. I think the team has done a great job of pulling together such a diverse range of initiatives. And I was also really pleased to see it cover some of the key concerning factors for us in Napier, and the Mayor touched on those earlier. You know, a city without access to hospitals or police cells or power for over a week or cell coverage for over a week, and you know, or access to our civil defence group. It was a really, really challenging time for our community, and I was really pleased to see us be able to pull that together into this document as our first official step, really, of being able to feed into the process. I also, you know, as I was thinking about it, I find the speed of this all really, really frustrating, to be honest. You know, the question, I can't remember which one of the elected members asked earlier, around when decisions on zoning will be made, to find ourselves 2.5 months later without even a clear time frame of when those decisions will be made. It's frustrating for us, let alone those people directly affected, because of those flow-on effects to reinvestment and managed retreat and insurance. And so I think if we can play our part in getting the information to the processes that need be, I just pray that they make those decisions really quickly. And I hope that they see the faces and the people that we see when we're making these decisions, because it is about our people and they are affected. And I think it's sometimes really easy to look at Napier as a little island and say, you know, you can walk down the main street and feel like nothing happened potentially. But you've got to remember we've got a huge range of affected communities on the boundary of us that are living in Napier who are displaced. We've got all of the effects that the council has talked about on communities, on businesses, on industry. And so while things may look rosy, they're not. And we see that now. I can't remember which agency it was saying the other week that the death toll keeps going up because people are being affected personally by all of the ongoing other effects. So thank you for pulling together our part in this, and I hope really strongly that it means other decisions flow quickly. Thank you.
Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just a note of thanks to the staff. This is an enlightening document, really. As a council, we generally deal with issue by issue, dealing with individual or groups of individuals with particular causes and campaigns and individual things they want us to achieve. This event affected everybody more or less at the same time. However, we need to remember that there are some people that have been affected more than others. And there are some people, particularly in our Esquivue and Awatoto Brookfields area, that are really only now discovering how much this event has devastated their futures. And I think we have to be very mindful going forward that we can't leave those people behind. We have to remember that while many people are enjoying a latte at the local cafe, those people continue to go back to a devastated property, a home that is months, if not years away from restoration. And we have to really remember that those people are part of our community, and many of those people are currently missing the opportunities to get resources and assistance because they're simply not aware that those facilities are there. And I think that's the sort of advocacy role that we as a council and our staff can play as we go forward to make sure that we don't forget the people that have been most affected by this event. But I really congratulate the staff and our community for coming together in a very short period of time to highlight their issues, concerns, the risks and the opportunities that we have. And I think this is a good opportunity for us to move forward.
Councillor Crystal.
Yeah, through the Mayor, just thank you again for doing this. You know, if we could have put a pin in a calendar and asked for a worse week for a cyclone to hit Hawke's Bay, you couldn't have asked for one. It was economically the worst possible time with the events happening, our apples being picked, our crops being picked. It hit us at the worst time, and that economic effect on Hawke's Bay hasn't probably even been realised yet, because that money is not in the bank anymore. Businesses are just starting to feel that effect of people not coming to Napier and Hawke's Bay, and people, our farmers not coming to town to spend money. It is huge. And, you know, a comment from my sister in Auckland said, everyone's forgotten. You know, then people, New Zealand are going on with their lives and we are still here dealing with this. So I think we need to go into bat for us big time, and people need to not forget.
Any further speakers before I put the motion? Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Anne.
Could I, out of 10, I just wanted to acknowledge Gus Charteris's efforts in helping us with this. He's done an outstanding job for us.
Well said, Richard. Thank you. Now we have our tenders let report, of which we have one tender that has been awarded, one contract awarded over the $100,000, $458,314 to Downer, New Zealand. Do I have a mover and seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Price, Deputy Mayor Brosnan. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. We have no minor matters, so that takes us through to reports from the Audit and Risk Committee held on the 31st of March. I'll read these out with a view to moving them in bulk. However, if anyone does have any questions on one of the items, please just let me know and we will take a break to answer any questions. So we had 10 reports come through to our Audit and Risk Committee. Firstly, the Health and Safety Report for the October through to December 2022 quarter. Then the Sensitive Expenditure for the Mayor and Chief Executive. The Sensitive Expenditure Policy Update. Audit and Risk Charter Review. External Accountability, the Audit New Zealand Management Report. The Audit Plan for 2022-23 Annual Report, the Annual Plan 2023-24 Key Assumptions, Risk Management Report, and then a verbal update on the Asset Management Roadmap and a verbal update on the Response and Recovery Phase. I'm happy to move those from the Chair as a member of the Audit and Risk Committee. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Mawson. If there is no questions or general discussion, I will put that, and all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Now, the recommendation to exclude the public, if I could have a mover and seconder. Thank you, Councillor Taraha and Councillor Crystal. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried, and we will just take a brief